Do you struggle with the reading multiple choice questions on the AP Language and Composition test? What? Does your friend Shawnee eat those reading MCQs, but you don't even know what I'm talking about? Well, don't fret, bro, because after this video, you too will be eating those AP reading multiple choice questions. Yes. Before we get too deeply into the AP Reading MCQ section, we should make sure you understand the overall structure of the AP Language and Composition test. The AP Language and Composition test is divided into two sections: essays and the multiple choice questions, or MCQs. You'll have 1 hour to do the MCQ section, and it'll be a total of 43 to 45 questions. The essay section will be 2 hours and 15 minutes, and you'll write 3 essays. If you're interested in videos about those essays, look at other videos on my channel. Yes. Now, the multiple choice section itself is divided into 2 sections, the reading section and the writing section. The reading section asks you to comprehend a reading passage and to analyze it rhetorically, thinking about the rhetorical situation and organization and structure, and to then answer questions based on that analysis. The writing section will ask you to read passages that resemble drafts and then to make some suggestions for revision that will improve the passage. If you're looking for videos on the writing section, though, you're going to have to subscribe and wait a second because I'm going to make that video in just a couple weeks. The reading section is going to be divided into 2 sets of questions, which means there are going to be 2 passages for you to read, and the 23 to 25 total questions in the section are going to be divided between them. There will be 1 reading from what you might consider olden times, which means it's going to contain some archaic language and style, and 1 reading that will be more contemporary. The multiple choice questions focus on 4 skills. 1 is your awareness of the rhetorical situation. 2 is your ability to connect claims and evidence. 3, your ability to understand the passage overall for reasoning and organization. And finally, 4, your ability to understand and recognize style choices, such as the rhetorical choices that the writer is making and the rhetorical appeals that the writer is appealing to through those choices. Yes. Beyond these 4 skills, you're going to have 2 basic tasks when you try to answer these MCQs. 1 is just reading the passage. The other is choosing the best answer and employing strategies in order to do that. I've already made a separate video that goes into more detail about these strategies, and I will link it in the information below. The basic thing that you want to remember is that the AP Language and Composition test is mean. And the AP will kind of try to trick you. It knows what you think, and it knows your reasoning, and it knows the kinds of mistakes that you're going to make, and it will try to exploit them. Look out for 3 major types of distractors or misleading answers that the AP will try to give you. 1 is an answer that has 2 parts, but only one of them is correct. If only one of the parts of the answer is correct, it's wrong. 2, the basic statement might be true, but it might just not answer the question that is being asked of you. And 3, it might be a vague version of the correct answer. There might be a more specific version of the correct answer among the choices, and if so, you should pick that one. You should employ this understanding of distractors to eliminate bad answers so that you can narrow down your choices and help you choose the correct answer. Today's helper is, you guessed it, the Licky Boy. He likes to lay around between your microphones and just generally help you. Sometimes I'll look at you, sometimes I'll stretch out. If you need a helper when you are doing your YouTube videos, then this Licky Boy is the boy for you. Exit Licky Boy. So, thanks for reading with me. Let's go through one of these AP reading multiple choice questions. First, we'll read it together, and then we'll work through some of the questions together. In order to read it, though, I'm going to have to put on my reading glasses. Okay, great. Now I've got this question and the passage up in my screen. I'm just going to kind of maybe simulate my thought process as I read this. I know it might seem strange. It's not really going to be exactly like I'm reading because I'm going to be talking, but why don't you read along with me as we read it? Okay, questions 19 through 24 refer to the following. Okay, so I know now the next 5 questions are on this one passage. The following passage is excerpted from a book published in 2017. That doesn't really tell me that much, except that it's a relatively recent piece of writing. Animal life has been all but destroyed in sudden planet-wide exterminations 5 times in Earth's history. That's quite a hook. There are the so-called Big 5 mass extinctions, commonly defined as any event in which more than half of the Earth's species go extinct in fewer than 1 million years or so. We now know that many of these mass extinctions seem to have happened much more quickly. Thanks to fine-scale geochronology. All right, you can hover on the footnote, so you should just do that, so you know what they mean. We know that some of the most extreme die-offs in Earth history lasted only a few thousand years, and at the very most may have been much quicker. A more qualitative way to describe something like this is Armageddon. Again, I'm going to hit the footnote. Now that I've gone through this introductory paragraph, I kind of have a sense of what this thing's going to be about. I'm going to go maybe a little faster. I'm maybe not going to read all of the paragraph. The most famous member of this gloomy fraternity is the End Cretaceous mass extinction, which notably took out the non-bird dinosaurs 66 million years ago. I bet the rest of this is going to be about the End Cretaceous mass extinction. But the End Cretaceous is only the most recent mass extinction. Oh, okay. So it's about the End Cretaceous in relation to the other mass extinctions. The volcanic doomsday whose stony embers I saw in the cliffs next to Manhattan. Go ahead and click on it. That's there's 3 other major extinctions preceded it. The T-Rex, under the reason. The dinosaurs are most characteristic, blah, blah, blah. But if it was a space rock that did in the dinosaurs, it seems to have been a unique disaster. That's kind of a transition sentence there, from thinking about the space rock hypothesis to maybe something else. Some astronomers outside the field push the idea that periodic asteroid strikes cause each of the planet's other 4 mass extinctions, but this hypothesis has virtually no support in the fossil record. So this is the problem that's being addressed here. In the past 3 decades, geologists have scoured the fossil record looking for evidence of devastating asteroid impacts at those mass extinctions and have come up empty. So maybe these asteroids are not the main thing in this sentence. But in other earlier mass extinctions, it might have been neither volcanoes nor asteroids at fault. I guess the rest of the thing in this previous passage was about, this previous paragraph was all just about if it was asteroids or volcanoes. It might have been neither volcanoes nor asteroids at fault. Instead, some geologists say that plate tectonics, perhaps even biology itself, conspired to suck up CO2 and poison the oceans. Much of the planet's misfortune, it seems, is homegrown. So this is saying that mass extinctions can occur even without asteroids or volcanoes. That has to do with the carbon dioxide. Luckily, these uber catastrophes are comfortably rare, having struck only 5 times in the more than 500 million years since complex life emerged, blah, blah, blah. It's pretty clear that times of high carbon dioxide, and especially times with coincide with mass extinctions, writes universal paleontologist, and end Permian mass extinction as here is the driver of extinction. So what I can see from this paragraph is that it moves from the introduction of the idea of Armageddons and mass extinctions to talking about the asteroid hypothesis, to talking about the possibility of volcanoes and some of them, to finally arriving at probably the most common, which is a lack of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere caused by plate tectonics or something else in biology. And that's what this paragraph is about. Now, let's go through some of the questions together, and I'll try to help you reason through it as I do. Which of the following best explains the author's decision to place the sentence, a more qualitative way, ... Armageddon at the end of the first paragraph? All right, so I know I'm at the end of the first paragraph here, and I know probably pretty much, though, I'm going to have to consider what came before it in order to answer the question. All right, let's go through the answers. A, it enables the arrangement of sentences to mimic the sequence of events described in the paragraph. That just doesn't seem right, because the arrangement of the sentences do not show a sequence of events in that paragraph. B, it signals a shift in the author's assessment of the events he describes in the paragraph. Maybe, because it does say a more qualitative way, so that could be a shift in the author's assessment. So let's leave that one maybe. C, it lessens the likelihood that the description will alarm readers. I'm going to say no. I'm going to cross off C because there's nothing about the word Armageddon that does not alarm people. Or D, it allows the author to justify the description before introducing it. So now I've gone down to B and to D, and I'm thinking D because this word, all of this stuff before the word Armageddon, about the mass extinctions and their speed and their extreme die-offs and things like that, they seem to be leading up toward the word Armageddon. And I would say that that is going to be more right than B. B looks also comparatively vague to D, so I'm going to say D. And you'll never believe it, D is the right answer. Yes. All right. Let's move on to number 20. The author italicizes the term recent, paragraph 2, sentence 2, primarily to emphasize that the end Cretaceous mass extinction blank. All right, so let's put paragraphs 2, sentence 2. But the end Cretaceous is only the most recent mass extinction in the history of life. So I know that it has already emphasized that the end Cretaceous mass extinction here, it's talked about it all the way up to the sentence. And then it introduces the idea that there are other mass extinctions in the history of life. That's interesting. Let's go to some answers. Okay, A, it was less destructive than people assume. I don't think so, because it didn't say anything so far that made me think that the end of Cretaceous was less destructive than it already described it as, which was an Armageddon. B is more relevant. Maybe it's going to say it's more relevant. C is not as well documented as earlier mass extinction. D is not as exceptional as reputation might suggest. I'm going to have to read a little more to see what the right answer is. The volcanic doomsday, whose stony embers I saw, struck 135 millions before the death of dinosaurs. This disaster and the 3 other that preceded it are invisible for the most part in the public imagination. This isn't entirely without reason. For one thing, dinosaurs are the most charismatic. So I didn't get anything about it being more relevant than other mass extinctions. And I didn't get the idea that it's not as well documented. It didn't really say that much about documentation there. So I'm thinking its D is not as exceptional as its reputation might suggest. And that makes sense too, because this author uses the word, it is only the most recent, which makes it sound not exceptional, actually just most recent. So the answer, never going to believe it, is D. Yes. 21. In the context of the second paragraph, the author describes dinosaurs as the most charismatic characters in the fossil record. So you're going to have to go back to where we were here. You can kind of follow my mouse here where it is. Let's see what my options are. Explain why only one of several mass extinctions has received coverage in popular media. Maybe. Because this idea of popular seems to fit this idea of charismatic, maybe. People and things that are charismatic tend to be popular. I'm going to leave this as a possibility. B. Argue that the general public's fascination with only one of several mass extinctions is scientifically justified. I don't get the sense of that at all, because this idea of things being charismatic doesn't necessarily scientifically justify anything. It says also dinosaurs hog most of the popular press. Things that hog seem to take up more than what is right for them to take. So I'm going to think it's not about hogging. C, account for the relative lack of research on extinct life forms other than dinosaurs. I don't think so, because it doesn't say anything like that. Defend the great importance. I don't think so. It also says, let's see, the dinosaurs were wiped out in spectacular fashion. So spectacular, again, doesn't necessarily mean important. It just means that people paid attention to it a lot. So I think it's A. Explain why one of several mass extinctions received coverage in the popular media. And this part about hogging, and this part about spectacular, and this part about charismatic, all to me explain popularity. The answer is B. 22. In the third paragraph, the author discusses the role of asteroid strikes in mass extinctions, primarily two. All right, so I know now I'm going to have to go through paragraph 3. So now I might do a quick reskim of paragraph 3 before I answer the questions. C, it could challenge a generalization made by certain astronomers. It seems like it could, because it talks about uniqueness here, and uniqueness is often the opposite of general. B suggests that volcanic eruptions are more destructive than asteroid strikes. No, it does not. It says that they're equally destructive. B, explain why volcanic eruptions are more common. It's not arguing anything more about one being more common than the other. D, acknowledge the merits of a position he rejects. I don't think it really looks at the merits of it in this position here. It just talks about the merits of the volcanic theory, if anything, more than it talks about the merits of the space rock. So I would think then that would narrow me down to D and to A. And I'm thinking that he's not really acknowledging the merits of the space rock issue as much as he is undermining the merits of it. So I'd say he's challenging the generalization. And again, part of my reasoning here is that uniqueness here, this idea of a unique disaster, is the opposite of what is a generalization. He's talking about the idea of space rocks being a generalization for mass extinction events. And he's introducing the idea that there's other reasons for mass extinction that are probably more common. All right, let's go to number 23. In the context of his treatment of mass extinctions earlier in the passage, the author's remarks toward the middle of the fourth paragraph, rather ... homegrown, offer a perspective that is. Now I'm going to have to go to paragraph 4. I'm going to review this paragraph really quickly, and then I'm going to get to this last sentence where it says, much of the planet's misfortune, it seems, is homegrown. A, it's mildly reassuring. No, it isn't. The idea that the mass extinction events come from something other than volcanic events or asteroid events, and that they're actually more commonly an event of excesses in carbon dioxide is actually not mildly reassuring. So I'm going to cross off A. B, surprisingly complacent. Maybe. So there's something about homegrown that seems like an understatement, so maybe. C, somewhat ironic. Maybe. D, thoroughly jaded. I would say no, because the idea of thoroughly here doesn't go with the idea of an understatement that I thought about with homegrown. So that brings me down to B or to C. And I think my answer is actually going to be C, because irony is a situation where you're using a word that is somewhat dissonant or not expected in that context. And things that are homegrown are usually actually good, like homegrown tomatoes and homegrown herbs. Those are good, but this is not a good thing, this mass extinction. So I'm going to go with answer C, and you wouldn't believe it? That's the right answer. 24. In the final paragraph, the clause set off by the dashes, and especially ... rows, relates to the rest of the sentence by. So now I'm going to go to where it says, this part, which is right here, it's pretty clear that times of high carbon dioxide dash, and especially times when carbon dioxide levels rapidly rose dash, coincided with mass extinction, writes University of Washington paleontologist, blah, 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 Peter Ward. Here's the driver of extinction. All right, so let's go through the answers to see what we've got. A, introducing a plausible claim that the rest of the sentence justifies. I don't think that's right, because if anything, the first part of the sentence before the dashes is introducing the plausible claim. So I'm going to scratch that off. B, strengthen the assertion made in the rest of the sentence, dash, and especially times when carbon last rose coincided. I don't think it really does strengthen the assertion. It doesn't offer new evidence. C, offering a potential explanation for what the rest of the sentence describes. I don't think it's an explanation at all. D, highlighting a subset of the cases referred by the rest of the sentence. I think this is right, because this here says especially. Especially seems to be offering a subset, because something that is a special is something that is part of a subset. Like if you said, I like all ponies, especially black ponies, that would mean that all the ponies I like are like not only black ones, but the other ponies, but especially the subset of black ones. That's what I like. So I'm going to go with D, highlighting a subset of the cases referred by the rest of the sentence. And you wouldn't believe it, that's the right answer. In real life, you're probably going to have between 10 and 12 questions on each passage, but I didn't want to go through 10 to 12 with you because I didn't think you'd watch a YouTube video of me reasoning through them that long. If you want to learn more about my process of elimination, you might want to look at my introductory video to AP Language and Comp multiple choice questions here in the description. And if you're interested in the AP writing multiple choice questions, watch out for my upcoming video on those types of multiple choice questions. Yes. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Zubify. Remember, come back for more Zubify.